Today's a beautiful day, and we're about to dive into the next heartwarming chapter of the story between single mom Tuna and Kiet. After all the ups and downs they've faced, this episode brings a few moments of joy and maybe even hope. It's those quiet, tender moments that remind us how love, no matter how complicated, still finds a way to shine through. If you've been following their journey, you won't want to miss what's coming next. So grab a cup of tea, sit back, and join me as we see what unfolds for Tuna and Kiet in this next emotional turn. Let's get into it. Yesterday, with a heart full of fear and determination, Tuna set out to find Kiet. She didn't know what she would say. She just knew she had to see him, to know the truth, to feel some kind of certainty. She went to all the familiar places, the spots where they used to meet, the corners of the city where memories still lingered like echoes. But no matter where she looked, Kiet was nowhere to be found. It was as if he had vanished, disappeared into the silence. With each passing hour, her anxiety grew. Her mind raced with questions she couldn't answer. Did he leave because of her? Was he gone for good? Had he truly decided to walk away from everything they had built together? She wanted to believe there was another explanation, some reason that didn't end with her being left behind. But the silence, it was louder than any answer. Tired and emotionally drained, Tuna finally returned home. Her daughter was waiting, unaware of the storm brewing in her mother's heart. As Tuna tucked her into bed, she tried to smile, but her mind was somewhere else, replaying the past, imagining the worst, asking the same question over and over again. Where is he? That night, she sat alone in the dark, her thoughts circling like restless waves. Was this abandonment, or just a misunderstanding? She didn't know. All she knew was that her heart ached for answers, for closure, and for the man she loved. Whatever tomorrow held, one thing was certain: the waiting would be the hardest part. It was still early when Kiet arrived at work. The air was crisp, the morning quiet. But as he took a short break from the day's labor, he found himself deep in thought. His mind drifted, once again, to Tuna. He remembered something she'd shared with him not long ago. Back when she is still with her ex-husband, they had never officially registered their marriage. At the time, she hadn't been old enough. That detail, once small and passing, suddenly took on new meaning. Kiet sat in silence, almost stunned by his own realization. So, technically, there's no legal bond between her and that man, and it's not like they're together anymore. She's raising that child on her own. What if that little girl is mine? He muttered to himself, half in disbelief, half in quiet conviction. Why am I stopping myself? Why am I pretending like I don't have the right to care, to love her, to protect her and give her a better life? For the first time in weeks, things began to make sense. The confusion, the guilt, the fear, it all started to melt away. Kiet had been holding back, hiding behind doubt. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was fear of rejection. Or maybe he just didn't think he deserved a second chance. But now he saw it clearly. He didn't want to keep running. He didn't want to stand by and watch the woman he cared about struggle alone. He didn't want to live with the what ifs. What if he could make her smile again? What if he could give her daughter the kind of fatherly love she deserved? What if he could build something real with Tuna? That morning, something shifted inside him. This wasn't about chasing a fantasy anymore. It was about doing what was right, for her, for the child, and for himself. Kiet made a decision. As soon as he finished his work today, he would head straight to Tuna's house. He would talk to her, not with hesitation, but with honesty. He would open his heart. No more secrets, no more doubts. Whether she was ready to accept him or not, at least she'd know the truth, and at least he'd know he tried. Because sometimes, the scariest step is the one that matters most. While Kiet was working through his own thoughts, Tuna was back at home, quietly tending to the weeds in the small yard outside her house. Her hands moved mechanically, pulling at the grass, but her mind was far away, completely consumed with worry. For days now, she had searched everywhere for Kiet. She'd gone to his house, checked in at his job, even asked around the places he frequented, but he was nowhere to be found. A part of her feared the worst. Had he simply decided to walk away? Was he really gone from her life for good? That fear tugged at her heart relentlessly. As she worked in the soft morning light, sweat forming on her brow, her mind replayed every conversation they had shared. Every time he smiled, every time he helped, every moment he held her daughter so gently. It all came rushing back like a wave crashing into the shore. Then suddenly, she heard something, a sound that made her freeze in place. The gate creaked open. She stood up, heart pounding, and there he was, Kiet. He was walking through the gate, dressed in his work clothes, dust still clinging to his boots. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. Without a second thought, Tuna dropped the gardening tool in her hand and ran toward him. Tears welled up in her eyes as she threw her arms around him, embracing him tightly, as if afraid that if she let go, he might disappear again. "Where have you been?" she cried, her voice shaking. "Why did you avoid me? Were you planning to leave us behind? Are you not coming back to us?" Kiet looked stunned for a moment, caught off guard by the raw emotion in her voice. But then he placed his hands gently on her back, holding her as firmly as she was holding him. "No," he said softly. "I just had a lot of work the last few days. That's all. I would never abandon you, or your daughter. Never." She pulled back just enough to look him in the eyes, still unsure, still searching for the truth in his expression. "I'm sorry," he continued. "I didn't mean to worry you." Tuna shook her head, wiping her tears. "No, you're not the one who should be sorry. I know I said some things that may have hurt you. I just didn't know how to handle everything, and maybe I pushed you away." He sat down on the small bench beside the garden and motioned for her to join him. She did. Kiet looked at her, steady and sincere. "I've been thinking a lot, and I've realized that no matter how messy this gets, I can't keep running. I'm done hiding. I want to be here, for you and for your daughter. I want to protect you both. I want to be part of your life." His words weren't loud, but they carried weight, like a promise made not just from the lips, but from the soul. Tuna looked at him, the doubt in her eyes slowly giving way to something warmer, hope. And for the first time in what felt like forever, the tension between them eased. They sat there in the quiet, two people who had been carrying the weight of so many unspoken fears, finally letting it all out. They shared their thoughts, their regrets, their hopes. They laughed at small things, talked about the past few days, and even joked about how emotional they had just been. It wasn't dramatic or grand. It was simple, real, and it was everything they both needed. Kiet's presence, his words, and the calm in his voice made one thing absolutely clear. He wasn't going anywhere, not this time. From that moment on, something shifted. The silence that once created distance between them had been broken, and in its place, a quiet understanding, a connection rekindled not by fireworks, but by truth, vulnerability, and the courage to stay. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. Because sometimes, the most powerful promises are made not with rings or ceremonies, but with honest words, tired eyes, and a hug that says, "I'm here. I'm not leaving. Not anymore." After their heartfelt conversation, a warm sense of peace settled between Kiet and Tuna. The tension that had once filled the air was gone, replaced by something much lighter: comfort, connection, and even a little joy. With a soft smile, Kiet glanced around the yard, noticing the overgrown patches of grass and scattered leaves that Tuna had been working on earlier. Without saying a word, he rolled up his sleeves, walked over, and began helping her pull the weeds and clear the yard. Tuna looked up, a bit surprised, but smiled as she watched him quietly join in. Side by side, they worked together, hands dirty, sweat on their brows, and laughter occasionally breaking the silence as they teased each other about who was doing a better job. There was something incredibly grounding about the moment. It wasn't grand or dramatic. It was just the two of them, sharing a simple task, building something small but meaningful. Every weed they pulled, every stone they moved. It was as if they were also clearing away the past, making space for something new to grow between them. By the time they were done, the yard looked cleaner, brighter. But more than that, it felt different, like a place of hope, not just survival. They stood together, admiring their work, breathing a little easier than they had earlier that morning. It may have just been yard work, but in that quiet moment, it meant something so much more. It was a fresh start, not just for the house, but for both of them.
Trước cổng xưởng gỗ nơi Kiệt đang làm việc, một người đàn ông lặng lẽ đứng nhìn vào bên trong. Gương mặt anh ta không lộ rõ cảm xúc, nhưng ánh mắt lại toan tính và lạnh lẽo. Đó chính là chồng cũ của Tử Na, người mà cô từng cố gắng rũ bỏ khỏi cuộc đời mình sau khi biết được Kiệt là người mà Tử Nha nhắc đến trong những cuộc trò chuyện. Người đàn ông bắt đầu nhen nhóm một ý định âm thầm tiếp cận Kiệt, theo dõi từng bước đi của anh và bằng cách nào đó khiến cho Kiệt và Tử Nha không tiếp tục bên nhau. Không để mất thời gian, chúng ta tiến thẳng vào bên trong xưởng, gặp Kiệt. Giờ đây, đang ở cương vị quản lý mới, anh ta giả vờ là một người xa lạ, chỉ đơn giản đang tìm kiếm một công việc để mưu sinh. Chào anh, tôi ở đây đang tuyển người. Tôi từng làm ở vài xưởng gỗ, không ngại vất vả miễn là có việc để sống, anh ta nói với giọng thật giả tạo. Kiệt, như bao lần khác, vẫn với sự tử tế và bao dung của cách nhìn của người khác, anh không hề nhận ra trước mặt mình là ai. Anh cũng chẳng hề biết quá khứ đằng sau gương mặt đã từng khiến Tử Nha đau khổ như thế nào. Chỉ nhớ mang